Welcome everyone and very good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us today on this beautiful sunny day and deciding to spend the afternoon with us. You're all very welcome. My name is Nazik Ramadan and I'm the director of Migrant Voice, and I'm delighted and honored to be chairing this summit, our third summit at the Status Now. Not that I was hoping that we will have third summit. When we started on 27th of March 2020, we woke up to the fact that there are among us over 1 million people in the UK who are undocumented. We were struck by a pandemic, by a virus that does not distinguish or discriminate based on your immigration status. And we were waking up to the news that some people are actually getting infected with the virus and are dying needlessly because they're terrified of accessing healthcare. A group of us came together and decided to set up a Status Now network to call for indefinite leave to remain to everyone who's in the UK, who's undocumented or in a legal process. So all of us can access healthcare. And so all of us can go through this pandemic safely, and we all have rights as well. We avoid hearing stories in the news that some people can't access, are terrified of accessing healthcare, or they're worried about their immigration status, and they suffer needlessly. We felt it was the right time. It's always the right time to call for status for people who don't have status, but it's more important and relevant when we are in the middle of a pandemic. Again, to protect everyone, the migrants, of course, but also we knew that no one is safe until everyone is safe. All of us need to be safe in order to fight the pandemic. And this is some of our background. At the moment, we have over 150 signatories from across UK and also from Ireland. There will be a lot in the session, so maybe I shouldn't say too much right now. To try as a chair, maybe I should stick to the time. So welcome again. And at this session, which is our third summit, as I said, titled 10 Years of Hostile Environment, focusing on the need for change. I guess we are always looking forward, despite all the challenges, the obstacles, the barriers. It's really important that we keep positive, we keep looking forward and coming together. In our summit today, there'll be a number of sessions. The first session, we will be looking at where we are at as a campaign, what we've done in the past 2 years. Then we move to another session where we will look at what's going on at the grassroots level and look at working together for change. Then we will move into our session to talk about building a movement beyond the fragments with our new People's Tribunal project. So as I said, in our third year, we are looking forward. We're also delighted just to mention that we'll be also sharing some of the learning. Our colleagues from Republic of Ireland will share with us some of their learning, inspire us by some of what they've done in Republic of Ireland. Hopefully we can learn something from that. But it's very important and more important than ever that we do get together, that we work together, that we keep raising this issue, that we keep caring, and we keep fighting for the rights of over 1 million people in UK who are in the legal process or undocumented, because this should not be happening today, not in UK, not in Europe, not today. And we need to keep fighting to get status now for everyone. So without further ado, I will invite my colleague Crichton, who is from Status Now in Glasgow, to take us all through very briefly to tell us where we are at in our campaign Status Now. Crichton, over to you.
Oh, thank you very much, Nazik. And I will share my screen, if that's okay. Let me just share my screen. There we go. There you go. All right, yeah, there you go. Let me just move you guys away from me. And once again, we are delighted to have you here. Hopefully at the end of the summit, we'll all be greatly energized to advocate for change. Can you see my screen? Let me try that first. Is that okay? Yeah, all right, okay. So as you can see, it's all about Status Now. And what we know is that all human life is the same. We know that all human life is the same, but unfortunately in this country, not all human life is treated the same. We have people who cannot work. We have people in this country who cannot study. We have people in this country who cannot access health services. There are so many people in this country who cannot travel. People who have no bank account. People cannot get married if they want to get married. People who work all the time because they have no recourse to public funds. And the other people are detained. And other people live in fear of detention. Hence, we have got this status now, because we believe if people get their status, then there's going to be true equality in a way. So status now, basically we call upon the British and the Irish states to act immediately so that all undocumented migrants and people with a precarious immigration status, they are granted leave to remain. I'm trying to scroll down my screen. Oh, sorry. I use a cursor then. So who we are as Status Now, maybe some of you don't know. As Nazek said, we have over 150 organizations who have signed up to this call, and they cross all sectors. There are people from migration, local authorities. We have got politicians and so many organizations which are part of this Status Now network. And I'll just tell you one of the quotes which I found out from a proverb from Ethiopia. They say that when spiders unite, they can tie down a lion. I mean, that's exaggerating, but where there is unity, there's power. So as we come together as many organizations, there's a potential really to do a lot to bring change. So Status Now Network, it's an umbrella for everyone. And these people come to Status Now, they can define themselves as undocumented. Some they are undocumented workers, others they are just migrant workers without recourse to public funds. Some are just filling through the gaps, like from Windrush. Some they are in the asylum system. Others, part of this network, they are refugees. And we've got trafficked people, but also we've got British citizens who are activists. They don't like the system. They want to see equality. And there's also anti-racist people within this network who are just fighting against racism. Now the question is, how do we administer the network? The network has got a 5-member admin team. I'm part of it for Status Now. And the team really, we meet together every Monday to just see progress and give direction to the whole campaign. And this week we are delighted to welcome Anna Mesden. Maybe she's going to speak later. She's our first Status Now Network National Coordinator. So we are so delighted to have her. We believe that the network will be strengthened with her presence in the team. And also apart from that, the network is also administered by a reference group. And this reference group meets every fortnightly on a Monday. So maybe if you're interested to come to our meetings, you can let us know. Its members really from the reference group, they are self-selected from signatory organizations. And that's where we make decisions. And we also have regional working groups in London, in the Midlands, in Northwest, and nationally here in Scotland, where I'm part of the coordinators. And it's chaired by Faith from the Birmingham Asylum and Refugee Association. And the reference group is working through the terms of reference for the group. So we are still a work in progress. So where are we now? Let's continue. One of the things that we do is we raise awareness about StatusNow network across the whole UK. We try to grow the network, welcoming new members to be part of the network. So if you're here and your organization is not part of us and you're interested, we are looking for more people really to join the network. Where there's unity, there's always victory. So the more we get people, the more we speak together, there's power in that. But also we centralize the people on the lead on this network. There are people with a lived experience. Yeah, anybody can join the network, but we try to put people with the lived experience on the forefront. We also use different ways to bring awareness to the network. One of it, we publish interviews and articles in different outlets. And also we get involved in, just a moment. We also get involved in campaigning, joining other campaigns. We give presentations on events, and also there are some press releases that we give out. Furthermore, we get also involved by, as I said, publish articles. I think maybe later on we'll hear from, we just had our public health team published a research paper. We just have a research paper which has been accepted for publication. I hope probably Charlotte Bingland, who might be here, she's going to talk more about that as well, from the institute, from the Liverpool John Moores University. Going on, we lobby, we make a lot of lobby for change. We want to see change. So as a network, we get involved in local, regional, national meetings. Like, for example, we had a roundtable discussion with members of parliament. That was just in January 2022 on statelessness. But also our group in the Northwest region, they were present and involved in the planning of the Little Armor. And there was an event in the Northwest as well. The keynote speaker was a member of parliament. We have been involved in Stand Up for Racism National Conference. And in July 2021, we were involved in the London Festival of Ideas. And on the International Migrants Day, our Midlands group also organized an event just to mark the International Migrants Day. We have been involved as a network in COP26 rallies, the Kill the Bill protests, anti-refugee bill protests. And in Scotland, we challenged the police to investigate the death of a migrant who the media claimed he fell down from his flat. But we think it was a suicide because of the pressure from the Home Office. So we actually pushed the police to investigate. We'll hear more about that, about the People's Tribunal. But also I've been involved in the Quaker Asylum and Refugee Network meetings. We are part of the parliamentary demonstration opposing the Nationality Borders Bill. And we also conducted housing awareness training in Scotland and in England as well. We also, one of the tools that we use most in raising awareness is our website. And we're so grateful to Sheila, who does a fantastic work on that. Using our website, we amplify the voices of all signatories. So if you happen to have any news, anything that's going on to you, which you want to be on our website, that's welcome. And when you come to our website, you're going to find news against the hostile environment. There are also so many examples of institutional racism. And website postings and links to relevant work that we do. We also write editorials. There are some anti-racism posts there as well. And also on our website, there's a section just to highlight the impact of detention and deportation on families. We have got Deza here who's going to speak more on that. Here now is some of the outcomes of what we have done so far. We had some early day motions in Parliament. We are so grateful to Claudia Webb, MP for Leicester East, she really took our agenda really for Status Now for All in Parliament. So in June last year, in February last year, we had 80 motions in Parliament. But also one of the outcomes which we have done so far is the Status Now calling card for all communities of faith. And we also wrote a briefing paper on the Nationality and Borders Bill. So the network is developing relationships with the members of Parliament across all political parties. We have written some 3 dossiers for Great London Authority, and actually also for the independent Chief Inspector of Borders and Immigration and Faith Communities. And lastly, I would just want to say that later today, we are going to launch the People's Tribunal. Thank you very much for listening, and thank you, Nazik.
Thank you so much, Crichton. Thank you for taking us through what's been happening, where we are at in our campaign. Thank you. The next session, our colleague Faith, who's the chair of the Status Now reference group and also the chair of PARA, will take us through the second session, which is looking at what's going on at the grassroots level and living with precarious status, as well as highlighting the work of faith communities. So Faith, over to you. Faith, are you ready?
Hi, good day to everyone. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you. Yes, thank you.
Oh, great. Okay. Hi, greetings to everyone. I would like to wish all the mothers for tomorrow, Happy Mother's Day. That's why we decided to have this event today, so that tomorrow you continue to be the mother and you continue the fight that we're all on of getting status in this country. What I'm going to do then, I'm going to be introducing our next speakers on this section. The section is what is going on at the grassroots level for people living with precarious status, and they'll be highlighting the work of the faith communities. So our first speaker is Daisy and Moses from Enableness Daisy. I will hand over now to Daisy and Moses.
A good afternoon and a good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure really to be with you this afternoon. And my first thing is just I want to thank everybody who has been working so tirelessly to make sure that the people that were due to be deported to Zimbabwe previously, most of them, they ended up not going. It is because you guys were fought the real battle to stop these people to get deported, put it out of this country. However, the fight still continues. We, Faith and Daisy, they worked very, very hard as well to do the liaison with the families of the people that were in detention. They've been running up and down using their personal funds to actually try and help wherever they can. And they did manage. I want to thank them very much and the support from everybody. Now, what actually happened is that most of the guys, most of the men, particularly that were in detention centers, all those that we are aware of have now returned to their normal lives. They've been released from detentions. We worked very hard, sending them, calling airtime for them to manage to call their families and to discuss with us as well. And we've been in contact with their solicitors. It was just a runaround thing, which actually yielded some very good fruits. And we've been actually acting very, very hard as well here in the Northeast. And we've been joining the Kill the Bills and other, organizations that are around here. We've been going to do some protests at Hassockfield, where there is a female detention center that we are calling for it to be closed down. it is a really pressure that we are facing, because in this country we are no longer regarded. I think the government of England has lost the mandate of the 1967 Convention of Refugees and its protocol that relates that if ever somebody has been has run away from persecution from their original countries, they are not supposed to be returned back there. I think our prime ministers in the whole government have lost the meaning of everything. So I don't know what they can use to define what a refugee is or an asylum claimant is, because they seem to have lost the meanings of those things. However, we are not going to stop. We are going to keep on with the fight, and we want to reach to the highest level of the governments there, so that they can understand and we can redefine this term, so that they know it can embed into their brain, so that they know exactly what it means to be a refugee. What does it take for someone to become a refugee, and what elements that lead to that person to become a refugee? So we want to address all those things, and together, as we are doing this, like the previous speaker said from Ireland, they are really doing a fantastic job there as well. We want to support everything that can put all refugees at peace. At the moment, we've got wars looming everywhere. We've got confusion everywhere. And the people in this country, it's like they just use the media to publicize their ability to help, but on the ground, they do absolutely nothing. So what we are trying to do is now we keep on protesting. We've been doing protests at the local police station here. We keep on doing protests in the city center, and actually it's working very, 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 very well. It's absolutely good, and I'm very happy that everything is being recorded as well. And whenever we get pictures, we put them as well on Enabling Daisy, and it's absolutely hilarious. And I just want to leave 2 minutes. Probably Daisy has got something to say.
Hello. Good afternoon, everybody. I just want to appreciate everybody for the support. I think Moses has said it all. We've been working hard on the ground, just doing protests everywhere to raise awareness. And I think as well, like he said, people that were in detention center, the most important thing was, I guess, just to give somebody a call, to know that, we are out here and we are helping them. And, it just helps, I guess, mentally for somebody to know that there's people out that are standing for them. So mainly our support on the ground has just been working on protest and advocating for people, putting our voices out to kind of be a vessel for them really to speak out, about the situation that is going on at the moment. Most of the protests have been really successful. I'm sure everybody have seen the pictures that are coming in on Enabling Next Daisy. And we've had lots of phone calls, well, for people, families asking for support, encouragement, just a bit of encouragement, which is really powerful. And like Moses said, we do appreciate everything, the support from Status Now. Enabling Next Days has not only enabled others, me as well, when Moses was in detention, was kind of a strong pillar to have people around me to speak to. And that has also supported my kids mentally to know that there's people out there that are supporting us. So we're still working hard, obviously, on making our voices heard. And we thank you all. And that's all I got to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Daisy and Moses. Really, these people are out most weekends attending to demonstrations, and because they're just trying to change the system. Our next speaker is Mary Atkinson. She is from JCWI. She's a campaigns officer there. She's going to be talking on working together to lobby for change. Over to you, Mary.
Hi, thank you so much. it's hard to follow all of that, but it's really inspiring to hear all of the energy and the passion that is going into this work, because that's what will make us successful. And yeah, I don't want to take up too much time, but just to say a little bit about yeah, why we're here and why we think it's important. And I think, yeah, I mean, I'm just very inspired by all that's gone before, and I think it just really shows that the strength of our movement is in its diversity and in its you know, all of the different tactics that we can use, and it's really good to hear about all of the different things that Status Now members are doing. So protesting, speaking to MPs, speaking to like people in the workplace, all of that kind of it all, like the movement builds through the use of different tactics, and we kind of snowball our power in that way. And I think, yeah, this fight for migrants' rights is just, it's never been more important, and everyone here will know how difficult it can be. And we're operating in really difficult circumstances, of course, and we're in the middle of this horrible culture war where everything is kind of polarized and everything is either one thing or the other. And I just think now is such a time to stick to our values and to say what's most important to us: diversity, anti-racism, humanity, all of the things that have been mentioned before, because that's how we have a clear message and a strong voice, is just by never compromising on our principles and our values. And I think that's something that, you know, everybody here will understand and will want to kind of keep at the forefront of our campaigning. JCWI works, we provide legal advice to people. We have a phone line for people who are undocumented, and based on that work and based on our work with clients, we lobby for change. And I mentioned like all of the different tactics that we can use at the beginning, because our work is a lot about like policy, it's a lot about speaking to MPs, a lot about speaking to local councillors, producing research and reports. So that's kind of like the way that we focus our efforts. And it's really good to work like to do that, but also in collaboration with other groups who use different tactics, because like I say, like that's how as a movement we can grow our power. And our campaign priorities are on ending the hostile environment, and on campaigning for a 5-year route to regularization, so a new route to regularization that's much more accessible than what we have now. Yeah, and you know, I mentioned the hostile environment because it's at the heart of everything we do, and as we all know here, it's everywhere. It's in every walk of life. You know, somebody mentioned the right to work. You know, the bosses have the right to not employ people. You know, every aspect of life is touched by the hostile environment, but that doesn't mean that can kind of give the impression that it's impossible to fight. But in fact, it's the opposite of that. It means that everybody has the power somewhere in their life to stand up against it, because you know, we all you know, operate in ways that are touched by the hostile environment. And yeah, I won't say much more. I just wanted to say like how incredibly powerful it is to be, you know, for this network to exist, and for this work to be done by people who have lived experience of the hostile environment and of hostile immigration policies more generally. Like, it's something that is just so essential, and I know that there's much more that the movement and the sector need to do to support that work, because we won't win unless it's the voices of people who are undocumented that are at the heart of our work. And like I say, there's a lot more that needs to be done in the sector to support that work. And I think, and I hope that that's it's clear to everyone why that's so important, and it's clear to everyone that we need to do that work. And yeah, I mean, and not just because it will not just because it's important, but also because that's how we will win. There's such amazing examples of campaigns led by undocumented people in France, the US, and Ireland, which I think we'll hear about later. So yeah, and just my last thing that I'll say is that on the kind of diversity of tactics that we can use, I think it's also a really important moment to think about a diverse range of people that we can target as well. So, you know, JCWI traditionally focuses on Parliament and on kind of decision makers in Westminster, but there's lots more that we can do. You know, we need to think about the companies that are making money from the hostile environment, the companies that are kind of collaborating with the Home Office on this, and always reaching out to new allies and unusual allies. And yeah, I think kind of through the diversity of tactics and the diversity of targets and you know, the energy and passion of people who understand this because they've lived it, we will win. And that's all for me.
Thank you very much, Anna, for a lovely speech. Our next speaker is Anna. Anna is a member of Kanlungan Filipino Consortium. She's going to talk to us about survivors of trafficking. Anna is a domestic worker from the Philippines. She was trafficked into the UK in 2017 by her ex-employers. She is a member of the Filipino Domestic Workers Association UK and Kanlungan Filipino Consortium. She helps the others rescue them from other domestic workers from exploitation. All over to you, Anna.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having me here to share my experience and my testimony. In year 2015, poverty pushed me to go abroad. I went to the country of the Arabs to work to be able to support my children and to pay my loans. Since I work for my employer, I have not experienced treated well. Every day, they call me stupid and animal in my little mistakes. Many times I asked for help from my agency that deployed me to my boss. But the only advice that they gave me was to run away and go to their office, and I didn't do that. In 2017, my employer brought me to the UK as their only helper for the whole family with their 8 children with 6 months domestic workers visa. I'm the only one who does the houseworks and takes care of 2-year-old twins, 4-year-old girl, and their other children. They kept my passport. I'm working 17 hours a day, 7 days a week, without a day off. And my salary is only £330 per month. I'm not allowed to go out with any of their children. And when I'm outside with them, I'm not allowed to speak to anyone, especially my fellow Filipino. I don't have proper food. I'm only eating leftovers from them. And I don't have money to buy food because they directly send all my salary to my family in the Philippines. I don't have my own room. I'm sleeping on the floor in their children's room. Despite the maltreatment, I endured to work for them because I need money from them. But when my female employer slapped me, kicked me until I fell on the floor, I called the Philippine Embassy to ask for help. But they wanted to send me to home. That was not possible. Many of my creditors were waiting for me for the payment of my loans. So I just ran away from my employer. September 20, 2017, 6 a.m. in the morning, I came out the house carrying the black bin bag where I put some of my clothes and pretended that I was going to throw garbage. I went to our neighbor, the only single family I met in 2 months I was here in the UK. And this second family that I have been to, I also work more than 8 hours a day, 6 days a week, and they only pay me also 330 per month. And because I'm not comfortable with women's attitude, I Googled for Filipino community, where I found the FDWA, or the Filipino Domestic Workers Association, who helped me to refer me to Kalayaan, and Kalayaan referred me to the NRM. In December 2018, I received my positive grounds and also the positive conclusive grounds. And I have been waiting for the decision for my discretionary leave for over 4 years. And while I'm waiting, I'm not allowed to work. I'm receiving 40 pounds a week, which we all know that it is not enough to survive, especially I have children to support. They offer me an accommodation, but out of London. So I choose to live with a friend. They throw us there in a place where the only people we can meet are fellow victims of abuse. How can we forget the complicated things we've been through if we are just waiting there? They don't want us to know the laws. They make it difficult for us to just choose to go home to our countries. It is inhuman. We all want is equal rights, life with dignity. We are all human. We should have equal rights. We can only live once in this world. I hope they let us also experience a comfortable life. Let us call the UK government to give it status now for all. Before I end this speech, I would like to thank to Kanlungan, to FDWA, Gabriela UK, Hestia, Sophie Hayes Foundation, and the church for all the support for me to be brave on this fight. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. What a touching speech. Yeah. Anyway, one day we will all be free. That I don't even doubt. One day. Our next speaker is Father Herbert Fatuquela. I hope I've pronounced it right. He's going to talk. He's a chaplain for the Filipino Community Diocese of Leicester, Church of England. Over to you, Father Herbert.
Thank you and good afternoon. On behalf of the Filipino chaplaincy here in the Diocese of Leicester, I would like to thank you, especially the organizer, for this opportunity to share to you our experience before pandemic and during pandemic. Most of the Filipinos here in Leicester are either retired and active in the health service sector. Many of them are in the NHS and the care homes. During pandemic, this sector is one of the vulnerable in our society. A lot of Filipinos working in the hospitals and care homes are exposed to the virus. Interactions in the family were affected. Some has to leave their home and their family for several months because they are given accommodation near the hospital. Young children began to ask why they cannot do the normal greetings and hugs when their mom and dad get home from work. My son was so sad for several days because he cannot hug his mom. For 2 weeks after she got the virus in the hospital where she is working. And when she is recovering, I started to have the symptoms. So my son is sad again. Although he can now hug his mom, he cannot play with me. One remarkable thing that we do as a community of faith during the pandemic is the virtual service as a substitute to the physical gathering and mass in our church. The online conversations following the service of those who are in the Zoom meeting have greatly contributed to the well-being, especially of those who are alone and lonely. It also provides comfort for those who have lost loved ones. Also, the Filipino chaplaincy and the Bayanihan Leicester here formed volunteer teams to do shopping for those who are in need of assistance. And with the financial support from Kanlungan Consortium, we provided grocery items to those who are in isolation. The teams were also able to provide food packs of Filipino foods to hospitals and care homes here in Leicestershire. This is our way of showing our tangible expression of support to the frontliners and key workers, aside from clapping our hands to thank them. Other issues that we are able to extend support to the Filipinos in the community is the referral services to the safeguarding officers of the Diocese of Leicester of people who were victims of domestic violence. There are no cases of the undocumented Filipinos that were brought to the attention of the Filipino chaplaincy here in Leicester. But the members of the Leicester chaplaincy are active advocates in the promotion and protection of the rights and welfare of undocumented Filipinos, especially those in London. We had several events here in Leicester and where we invite members of the Filipino Domestic Workers Association to share to us their journey from being undocumented to becoming British citizen. And with this, we are able to develop champions for the rights and welfare of the Filipino migrants. We also send delegations to a peace forum in London, where resource persons are from the government of the Republic of the Philippines and the National Democratic Front of the Philippines to bring to the attention to the representative of the parties in the armed conflict in the Philippines the issues of several Filipino overseas workers being exploited in the host countries and are being treated as milking cows by the Philippine government through the various state exaction in the forms of many fees. In that peace forum, we express our support for the continuation of the peace negotiations and truly address in the negotiating table the root causes of the armed conflict. We raise the issues of landlessness and poverty as the major factor of internal and external migrations and to stop the labor export program of the Philippine government. I also had the chance to present to the all-party meetings on human rights situation in the Philippines at Westminster, attended by several members of the parliament, that the extrajudicial killings in the Philippines have reached the doorsteps of Philippine churches. Let me also share to you that Bayanihan Leicestershire is part of the launching of the April 28 coalition in Europe 2 years ago, as the campaign for regularization of undocumented migrants and failed asylum seekers are growing strong in Europe. Our organization joined the other 65 organizations and individuals to form the April 28 Coalition for Migrants and Refugees' Rights and Welfare, which is described in its unity statement as a Europe-wide formation of grassroots organization with migration background, religious organizations, non-government organizations, civil society formations, institutions, political parties, influencers, academics, and concerned individuals for migrants, even regular and irregular, immigrants, refugees, asylum seekers, and displaced people united in common objectives and shared values that all people have the right for equal protection in the continent. By this effort, I believe, is putting into the present context of what Jesus said. Come, you that are blessed by my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me. Thank you.
Thank you, Father Hubert, for such a lovely speech. Our next speaker is supposed to be Charlotte Biglen, who unfortunately is not feeling well to be here today. She does a lot of work with Status Now on health-related issues, but she just could not make it, and she was even weak to send us a video. So apologies on that. But our next speaker is our vibrant, active member of Status Now, who I'm very privileged to introduce, Lorraine Marcian Ponella. She is a chair of CARAC, which is Coventry Asylum and Refugee Action Group. And she is a wonderful poet. There's a lot of her videos on YouTube. If you can just go and find her on YouTube and follow her. And I'll ask my colleagues to put her link on the chat so that you can follow her, because just like Daisy, she's always on the streets campaigning, and she is passionate about fighting for people's rights. Lorraine, over to you.
Oh, thank you so much, Faith, for that introduction. Thank you. Yeah, so the poem I'm sharing today, it's called Train of Life. The man I saw on TV crying in Ukraine was a foreigner. He was told to go back to face Putin as if he had invited him to start with. The face of prejudice in its full glare. Everyone else jumped into a train to run away from a war they all feared for their lives. But not this man. He was not allowed to run away. He had a special place, like a special creation who loved death, loved war. They wanted a visa from him. He didn't have it. And so for the want of a piece of paper, his life could be sacrificed. He became less human for want of a document, a piece of paper. Something hit home about my case and my situation, the helplessness of it all, for me and all those like me. Statuslessness and statelessness, making us scared of our own shadows, have made us spend cows which are now headed to vaccine centers, suspicious of every strange face, but expected to behave normal. I feel that man in a strange land, no family or friends, looking different from everyone else, carrying nothing but his life, a life worth nothing in everyone's eyes. Because he's a foreigner, he's expected to live in a land raining bombs and bullets. It's now like he started it all. He's not interested in the fight after all. All he wants is to live and one day go back home. He looks like my people and me, living in fear and possible detention and being sent home where bullets and bombs of another sort await, where rights are denied, the last stop before a painful death of torture and rape. I remember my pastor always asked this question: of what use is it to have people starve when you yourself have everything? Is this the new normal where the denial of freedom for others is a sign of elevated status? Priti Patel says, status now for all will send a wrong message. We all remember who she is. Her own family came from India via Uganda. Status now for all is not something we can do, she argues. It will make everyone come here, as if when her family got here, it was for a holiday. Nobody wants to come here and leave their loved ones. Circumstances beyond control make all these people refugees. Has denying immigration status reduced the number of refugees? No. Refugees are not tourists. They are disturbed people with significantly bad memories of slaughtered relatives and friends, prison, rape, war, torture. Indefinite leave to remain or giving status to them is just one jump from being allowed to be human again. Is it not sad how we are addressing a serious labor shortage in the care sector? Government is recruiting carers from abroad with a few millions of able-bodied people just lying idle as undocumented or in the asylum system, because if they get status, it will send the wrong message. And so the state looks after them, gives them accommodation and health. These people who can look after themselves incapacitated by a policy that says common sense will send a wrong message. I argue for Status Now for All, to save millions of pounds and to contribute to government coffers in taxes and VAT when we buy goods from shops and invest in ourselves through courses of self-development. Let it be known. Status Now for All is not a cry for help. It is an appeal for common sense that empowers the oppressed to a person full of purpose. It's humane and the only way forward. Status Now for All will ensure that nobody gets off the train of life and is asked to fight wars and demons they did not start. Like that man I saw on TV crying in Ukraine. May God bless him and give him a long life. Thank you.
Thank you, Lorraine, for that wonderful poem. So we can all follow Lorraine on YouTube, and you can find more poems and enjoy them. So our next item is a video from one of the Status Now signatories called Jesuit Refugee Services. It's by Sophie Cartwright, who is the Senior Policy Officer at the Jesuit Refugee Services UK. She advocates for a just asylum system. She previously worked with people seeking asylum in Glasgow, and she has an academic background in theology. Let us all watch the video.
Oh, Faith, I think you need to share sound as well.
No, it's not. It's not me.
Oh, sorry. Sheila, could you share sound as well? Sorry, Faith. Should be able to do it through advanced sharing options.
Hi, sorry, I was trying to share. My volume's all on. I don't know what the problem is there. Anybody got any idea?
When you click share screen, you need to do advanced sharing options and then, or sorry, share screen and then in advanced, also make sure that the computer audio is selected. Oh,
right, okay. Right, so while I've just lost that video as well. This is let's just get I can get it quite quickly again. Here we go, this is Sophie.
Okay, in the meantime, can be looking on the chat and just be taking note of those links to the chat.
Good idea.
And there's a lot of information there that you can just keep it for another day and then be reading there.
Right, okay, so let's see if that works. Now it's messing me about, sorry. Let's try this again.
Just to send the link to Francesca.
Is that better? No. Okay, sorry. I'm sorry about that. Yes, I can send the links to Francesca. Do you want to talk among yourselves for a minute?
Sure, and I can try. And if it still doesn't work, then we can just put the link in the chat and people can watch these recorded interviews later on, so we can...
Yeah, the recorded interviews are unlisted at the minute, but I'll... Right, okay, so...
In the meantime, or maybe should we call Bishop, then we'll come back to this item.
Yep, sounds great.
Right. While our...
But the bishop's recorded as well, so I've just sent through the link to Francesca for the first one. I'll send her through the link to the bishop as well, and that's ready for the next thing.
I'm Sophie and I work for the Jesuit Refugee Service, or JRS for short. JRS accompanies, serves and advocates for forcibly displaced people in over 50 countries worldwide. In the UK, we've got a particular ministry to people held in immigration detention and people declared appeals rights exhausted and then made destitute by the asylum system, and also more recently to people in Napier Barracks. That's the former military camp that's now being used as asylum accommodation, which is actually in many ways a lot like detention. So these focal points reflect our priority to go where the need is greatest and to attend to needs that others aren't attending to. We're, as the name might suggest, a Roman Catholic and specifically a Jesuit organisation. And we work with and employ people of all faiths and none, and we're motivated by a commitment to human dignity, and we seek to stand in solidarity with refugees. We're also motivated by a belief that God is present in human history, even in its darkest moments. Now, because of the ethos that we have, we work in a relational way, and in a way that respects refugees' agency. We hope that this is reflected, among other things, in our advocacy work. For example, it's important to us that refugee voices and perspectives are at the centre of our advocacy, and our advocacy is closely tied to our service and accompaniment, so it revolves around the concrete issues that are faced by those that we support directly and the issues that are important to them. So, what does JRS advocate for? Well, unsurprisingly, we focus on the asylum system. And we call for a person-centred asylum system which puts protection and human dignity at its heart. We recently published a report, Being Human in the Asylum System, that draws together refugee experience and Catholic social teaching, and it sets out a vision for this in more detail. And to give examples of what we call for in this report, we call for borders that are open to those in need of protection and support for asylum claimants to live in dignity and to participate. This is a radically different vision from what those that we serve currently experience. They are too often disbelieved, detained, made destitute, re-traumatised by a hostile asylum system. And when we ask them what they want a system that is humanising, that respects their agency, that allows them to participate. Now, we're currently very focused on resisting the Nationality and Borders Bill, which is, of course, diametrically opposed to what we're calling for, and would punish refugees for how they travel and create huge further barriers to protection. We do this both by talking to MPs and by encouraging individuals and communities to engage with their MPs and raise their voices. We also support the Status Now campaign. This issue is crucial for those that we serve, because many of them have lived in the UK for years. It's their home, they've been here for decades, but because they've been let down by the asylum system, they have no status and they're in limbo. So those are a few of the key issues that JRS advocates on. How do we advocate? Well, there's not time to go into all of it, but one of several key ways is to create and enter into spaces of encounter, dialogue and challenge in communities. As a Catholic organisation, we get the opportunity to speak directly to a lot of faith communities. We run outreach events in churches, for example. And in these contexts, we hope to shed light on the experience and the situation that's faced by the refugees we serve, and also to expose the unjust politics that shapes it. Here we're speaking to people on some common ground, perhaps, for example, with a shared faith, but who may not know anything about the asylum system, and from a very wide range of diverse political perspectives. So here are chances to engage seriously with diverse communities, to hear their different perspectives, and hopefully to, by entering into conversation, to help change hearts and minds. And in this way, we hope to advocate and communicate in a human way.
Shall I share the next video now?
It is 1 year.
Yes, you can, Francesca.
Okay.
It is 1 year since we met our Status4All Summit. A lot has happened since we met. The focus today of our government and our society seems to be on the crisis in Ukraine. It is important that we respond to the immediate crisis and the situation around us. But it's also important that we don't forget the wider issues that we have been talking about. Or we shouldn't forget the problems and the crisis near our home or within our home, here, right here in this country. People living without status. Last year, I launched a faith calling card, encouraging faith groups to rally around this voice for Status4All. All faiths teach love and care. And faith groups consist of the largest network of volunteers in this country. We need the gift of that networking. Religion can draw people together, but sadly, religions can also divide us. And we have seen that in the history of humanity. And we see that often in our own communities. We live with the effects of Islamophobia and anti-Semitism and many other evils. They all come from deeper prejudices, which are often sadly, religious. So we need to find a way of helping religions or faiths to be embracing, welcoming, and including, or being inclusive, rather than being exclusive of each other. The best way to do that is to see where people work together. Surely we need to engage with individual religious groups and leaders and denominations, but we now need to also focus on interfaith bodies, interfaith networks, nationally, regionally, and locally. We need to focus on those people who recognize the common heritage that we all have. Those people who gather together, recognizing that we need to work together for common good. So may we engage with those interfaith groups and those who are able to understand religion or faith as something that can unite us rather than divide us and separate us. So I wish that we will have another year of fruitful campaign and cooperation between each other. May we find new allies. May we reach out to those who didn't understand us before. And may we be able to come together again with improved strength, enhanced passion, and increased hope.
Thank you very much. That was the speech by Bishop John Perumbalas. He's the chair of the Church's Refugee Network. Now I'll be introducing our next speaker, the MP John Ponella. He's the MP for Hayes and Harlington.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Hi, sorry, John. It looks like Faith's signal's not very good, but thank you very much for coming, and we can hear you.
Okay. I heard a bit of Faith. That's always the dilemma that we have on these online events. Okay. First of all, thank you for inviting me, and it's been interesting listening to the range of speakers I've heard so far. Just very briefly to explain my role, I'm the MP for Hayes and Harlington, which contains Heathrow Airport. Within my constituency, I have 2 detention centres, Harmondsworth and Colnbrook. The history of those detention centres is that 30, 40 years ago, when I visited Harmondsworth, it was a small building with housing no more than about 20 asylum seekers. Now there are 2 buildings. They house 800 asylum seekers in what can only be described as prison-like buildings. In addition to that, over the last year, there's 1,700 asylum seekers who are housed in local hotels in my constituency, largely as a result of what's happened over COVID, but also the influx of refugees coming via the Channel. I argue that when they're in those detention centres, that they are my constituents and I have the right to represent them. Unfortunately, the Home Office changed the rules on that a couple of years ago, and simply argue that if I have to take up any casework I have to do it through the MP from the constituency in which maybe they originally lived for some time. It's important people acknowledge, I'm sure you all know, that detention is used in this country on a scale greater than any other. And people are trapped within the system for months, and in some instances, we've even found years. In Harmsworth Detention Centre, we have had deaths. We have had suicides. And it is heartrending that many of the people who are detained are coming from war zones and suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder. And in addition to that, of course, often significant mental health problems. The regime has been quite, some have described it as brutal in the past. And as a result, there have been riots. In fact, Harmsworth has been burnt down in the past. Sophie made reference to the system dehumanizing people. It does, certainly. And it is distressing to see people having to go through that system. And what is, I think, remarkable is that most of the people held in detention eventually are released and eventually then settle within the community. I believe that that scale of detention shouldn't be used. In fact, I believe the detention centers are unnecessary and should be closed down. I can't bring good news to this meeting because I'm extremely worried that actually matters are going to get worse as a result of the Nationality Bill, the Nationality and Borders Bill, currently going through Parliament, which will most probably pass through Parliament finally in the next week. It makes matters worse because it criminalizes anybody who arrives in the United Kingdom not through a designated settlement route by the government. And the worry that we have is that those routes are extremely restrictive and limited, and therefore, of course, in desperation, people will come through other routes. If this law goes through, as it may well do, it criminalizes those individuals, but also criminalizes anyone who helps them as well. We're seeking at the moment to try and amend the legislation, but so far the government hasn't been willing to. We have raised in that debate as well the ability of people who have not full status at the moment, at least having the ability to work, the right to work. At the moment, they live on £5.60 a day allowance, and they live often in poverty. The right to work would enable them to support themselves, live with dignity. And the last calculation is that it would contribute at least over £200 million to the economy overall. So it is a policy that clearly we think is rational and suitable and appropriate. Unfortunately, the government isn't yet willing to accept that, but over the next few days, we'll be arguing again with government ministers to try and resolve this. But the real solution to this problem is to stop detaining people, acknowledge the responsibility that we have to asylum seekers who are refugees, of course, and also make sure that they have status and status now. But that's why this campaigning that's undertaken by yourselves and all our various colleagues and partners involved today is so critically important to ensuring that we secure the policy of status now that enables people to live full and decent lives within our community. That's exactly what we'll continue to do, working across political parties, working with religious and faith groups, of course, with trade unions and others, all those who I believe want to uphold standards of decency within our society. Thank you.
Thank you so much, MP John Daniel. Our next speaker is
I think we might have lost Faith again. Yes, Hector Wesley.
Hector Wesley is the NC representative for Public and Commercial Services Union. He's going to talk on working with the union. Mr. Hector.
Thank you very much for the invitation to address this meeting. Hope you can all hear me okay. Very glad to follow John McDonnell.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Oh. Yeah, I can hear you now. Okay, I'll start again.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. I'm Hector Wesley, a member of the National Executive Committee of the Public Commercial Services Union, and I'm very glad and happy to glad to be invited to say a few words at this meeting, and very glad to follow John McDonnell, who's actually the honorary president of the PCS parliamentary group. So it's very, very glad to be able to follow him and absolutely endorse and agree with everything he said in his contribution, and I'll try not to duplicate a lot of the very good points that he made. PCS, we represent 185,000 members in the civil service that work for the UK government, but also outsourced workers who work on government contracts. And what we often find ourselves as a union is a lot of our members in their official roles are asked to do things which they do not like. And that's why we often find ourselves as a union campaigning quite often against this current government, but also actually previous governments. And certainly on the issue of migration and immigration, a hostile environment, PCS has been consistently campaigning against policies from successive governments. Because one of the things we found is, this has gone back for decades, every government at some point will try and legislate on the issue of nationality and legislate in an adverse way. So we often campaign in terms of that. So certainly in terms of the hostile environment, we've been vigorously campaigning about that for years. A number of years ago, there was the infamous go home vans that the Home Office were using. We campaigned vigorously to get that sort of practice stopped. So we're glad to make links with Status Now. We will absolutely do what we can to talk to our fellow trade unions in this country through the TUC, other TUC affiliates, to actually encourage them to be supportive of the work of Status Now. I noticed in the chat a link came up to Migrant Voice. I know for the fact that the TUC, which is the umbrella organisation for trade unions in this country, is a supporter of Migrant Voice. So certainly, you will certainly the aims and objectives of this campaign will resonate throughout the whole of the trade union movement in this country. I'm absolutely sure about that. One indicator of that is in a couple of months' time, there is the TUC Black Workers Conference being held. And I know we'll be discussing during that conference some of the issues that have been discussed this afternoon. So I'm sure there will be support for the aims and objectives of your campaign. And I've got a few minutes. One thing I want to briefly mention is a specific action that we're doing at the moment. We're doing a judicial review against the government regarding the pushbacks policy. Hope you may have heard of it, but in case you haven't, I'll explain it briefly. We have members, for example, who work in UK Border Force, and over a number of months, actually quite a number of months, UK Border Force management, under the direction of the Home Office and the Home Secretary, have been trying to train staff, for example, to use jet skis in the English Channel to actually push back to stop any small boat, small craft from crossing the English Channel. Now, we're quite clear that that policy, not only is it inhumane, but we believe it actually breaches UK human rights legislation, but also UK and international maritime legislation. So for that reason, we actually are taking judicial review action, working alongside Care for Calais, which is a migrant support organisation working in northern France. We're taking judicial review action against the government to try and get that policy outlawed legally. We did try to get what's called an interim injunction to sort of stop the policy in its tracks. We didn't succeed in that. However, the case, the substantive case, the judicial review case, will be being heard week commencing the 2nd of May in the High Court. And certainly our lawyers, we're confident that we will succeed in that judicial review, because there's some fundamental issues of principle in terms of challenging the government in terms of their particular policy. One of the things certainly I do as a member of the National Executive of PCS is to actually explain some of these issues to our members, because a lot of our members don't know often the full horrors of policies such as no recourse to public fund. people might recall a few years ago when Boris Johnson was questioned before MPs. He sort of indicated quite a lot of ignorance of the policy of no recourse of public to public funds and the implication of that. So we do quite a lot of work with our members to explain some of these issues to our members. And one of the things, again, that I know as a rep myself is these issues actually are workplace issues often. I mean, we have members in PCS. Not all our members, for example, are UK nationals. We have foreign nationals who work in the civil service. And often we've had to intervene to protect members' interests when they, for example, have problems, delays getting their visas renewed. I dealt with a case a few weeks ago where my employer was trying to dismiss somebody, gave them 5 weeks notice of dismissal because the Home Office delayed renewing that members of staff's visa and work permit. So these issues actually often come back, are actually front and center often for some of our members in the workplace. And that's the reason why we will absolutely continue to campaign on this. So absolutely, again, reiterate my thanks for being able to say a few words to this meeting. Certainly, we all, as a union, are happy to promote the work of this campaign amongst our members and other TUC affiliates. And certainly, I would hope the ideal would be that, in the years to come, there won't be a need for campaigns like this to exist, because actually we would have changed the landscape on this issue for the better. And I'll leave it there. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hector Wesley. I hope everybody can hear me. Hi. Our next speaker is two people from Mercy Movement of Asylum Seekers in Ireland. I have a pleasure of introducing both of them. The first one will be Bulelani Mfako, and after Bulelani, it will have Lucky Kambule. Just a little bit about Bulelani. He grew up in Kailicha in Cape Town, and he became involved at an early age in protest. Let me start. Black people in South Africa lived in things that were slums, and that is how they got to be called Abahlali basemjondolo. Anyway, Bulelani is now campaigning for improved policing with neighborhood watches, and in 2017, he claimed asylum seeker protection from violence and targeted killings of LGBT and people. He is one of the spokespersons of Mercy in Ireland, where he's campaigning for the right to work for all asylum seekers and to end direct provision. He's also in the board of the Irish Council for Civil Liberties. While he's also reading for his PhD in law and TU Dublin. So as soon as Bulelani finishes, he will be immediate to you, my brother.
Very good afternoon, and thank you, Faith, and thank you for inviting us to this important summit. I will start briefly. Sorry, let me get some water. I will start briefly by introducing the movement of asylum seekers in Ireland and the work that has been done by Mercy since formation, and how we've managed to build relationships and engage with the legislature and the Irish government, but also how we've managed to hold the line on the many issues that we campaign on. Mercy, of course, was formed by asylum seekers in a direct provision center, which is an asylum accommodation center for asylum seekers. Back in 2014 in Cork, in Ireland. A lot of asylum seekers back then were not allowed to work. There was no right to work at all. The law prohibited asylum seekers from seeking or entering gainful employment or even establishing their own businesses. People were given a weekly allowance of €19.10 per week. It was even less for children. I think it was something close to £750 for an asylum seeking child per week. that, of course, meant that a lot of people were working cash in hand, so they would have been in work in the same situations that undocumented people would be in, and a lot of them were exploited. Of course, if you are working illegally, you wouldn't be given the same legal rights and protections that other employees enjoy in the workplace. And so asylum seekers got together, locked out staff from a direct provision center in Kinsale Road for a period of 10 days. And they had set a list of demands of things that they wanted to see changed. And from then on, a movement was formed by asylum seekers to advocate for themselves in changing the way the Irish state treated asylum seekers. I think Lucky would have, as he was part of that group, we'll talk more about that later. But I just wanted to give you a bit of background in where we come from. Over the years, our work has been through direct engagement with people, Irish people, ordinary people. We've spoken in schools, we've spoken in churches, we've spoken with trade unions, we've enjoyed support from trade union movement. We've enjoyed supports from student movement. So you've got student unions in Ireland, in Irish universities. We've got student societies that we have worked with. We've also built relationships with members of the press. And so quite a lot of our work involves ensuring that there is press coverage for issues that affect asylum seekers so that we aren't forgotten. It's very easy to forget people who live in direct provision centers, because these would be centers that are privately run, contracted by the Irish state to accommodate asylum seekers. They basically provide a bed and 3 meals a day. And for some people who aren't allowed to work, you are expected to wake up, eat and sleep and do nothing until you are allowed to work. And so by building those relationships and collaborations with external people or people who aren't in the asylum process, we were able to form a broad consensus amongst the people that we were speaking to. So Irish people, the trade union movement, other groups like NGOs, a consensus that things needed to change in the way the Irish state treats asylum seekers. And that consensus took a lot of hard work and a lot of years for people to build, because we don't always agree on what the alternative might be, but we all agree that things do need to change. And so we had to work and navigate those relationships and ensure that we never forget what our ultimate goal is. And that is, of course, ensuring that one, asylum seekers are allowed to work and are integrated into Irish society and aren't segregated, because we view the accommodation in particular centers as a form of racial segregation, because it's only people like us who live in those centers. Nobody else in Ireland lives the kind of lives that we live. And that is why it was important to raise that awareness and ensure that people who were directly affected were at the forefront of that, hence the formation of Marcian. One of the things we also do is peer-to-peer support, providing peer-to-peer support to people who are in the asylum process. And we've done that by necessity, not because it was something that we had always intended. At the formation of Marcian, there were a number of items that we had listed as things that as our primary objectives, which was to campaign for the right to work, to campaign for an end to direct provision, to campaign against the deportation regime, to campaign for access to education that is both for children and for grown-ups in the asylum system, and to campaign for papers for all. And that for us, through doing the work that we do, going out and visiting the centers where people live in direct provision centers across Ireland, we noticed that there was a need for that peer-to-peer support. A lot of people didn't have information, access to information, and they relied mainly on information from other asylum seekers, which sometimes is not always accurate. And so we always formed groups. Lucky will talk more about that. We have WhatsApp groups for the different centers, but also for different towns in Ireland where asylum seekers can access information as and when it becomes available very quickly, but also where they can raise issues and discuss issues that in fact we can strategize on how to overcome those issues. We've engaged formally with the legislature, the Irish Parliament. We've engaged through submissions to their committees in Parliament, both written submissions, but also oral submissions when those come up. We've also engaged with the government in terms of accepting their invitation to an advisory group that was established by the government to review the supports that are provided to asylum seekers, mainly through the system of direct provision. In the past, we hadn't engaged in their advisory group. They had a working group called the McMahon working group, was chaired by a retired judge. The reason for us not engaging with that group was simply that they they didn't have an explicit reference in their terms of reference to ending the system of direct provision. So they were looking for ways to improve the system of direct provision rather than abolishing it, which was our main objective, was to end the system of direct provision. And later on in 2019, towards the end of 2019, the Minister for Justice established an advisory group. It included retired civil servants. It was chaired by a former Secretary General for the European Union Commission, Dr. Catherine Day. It included the CEO of the Irish Refugee Council, representing the Irish Refugee Council, and the CEO of NASC, which is another migrant and refugee rights support organization based in Cork. We had, in that group, we reviewed the asylum system altogether and received submissions from different groups, but also we went to visit a number of the centers that had to be stopped during the pandemic because we were working throughout the pandemic in the group. We couldn't then visit the centers, but we made a number of wide-ranging proposals for how the Irish asylum system could be changed. One of the asks that Marci had was that people who have been in the system for 18 months should automatically be given status to stay in the country if they have been awaiting a final decision on their asylum claim for 18 months. That recommendation was not taken up because what we wanted that recommendation to be actually enshrined in Irish law. So we wanted them to amend the International Protection Act to give automatic status to a person who has been in the system for 18 months without a final decision, because it's not attributed to them. It is the state that doesn't employ enough resources to ensure that people are processed timely. We've had people, when Marci was formed, for instance, the waiting times, there were more than 50% of people who were in the direct provision system were awaiting a decision for more than 5 years, 5 years or more. And that situation has changed somewhat, but we still have people waiting a long time. By when we made the Catherine Day Advisory Group was making its recommendation, we had 1 in every 2 asylum seekers had been in the system for at least 2 years or more. And that's one of the reasons why the group opted to instead say that people who have been in this asylum system for at least 2 years should be given permission to stay in Ireland indefinitely, to remain, and a pathway to Irish citizenship. We also collaborate with other groups. One of the groups that we have supported was the Justice for Undocumented campaign. Justice for Undocumented campaign is based in the Migrant Rights Center, which has been leading the campaign for regularization of undocumented people. By 2020, when the Irish government, when political parties in Ireland were negotiating the formation of government after the elections, we had a coalition government formed, and they were negotiating the terms, the program for their next 5 years that they were going to be implementing. We asked members of the public to send an email, and we had drafted the text, and it included a call to end the system of direct provision, but to also give status permission to remain to any non-EU national who has been in the country prior to the pandemic. They didn't implement that in full, or they did commit to ending the system of direct provision. They also committed to regularizing undocumented migrants, but they said they will regularize undocumented migrants who have been undocumented for long term. The JFU, our colleagues, comrades in JFU, had done research on undocumented people in Ireland, and they found that a lot of undocumented people were actually working. Their situations might differ. Some may be, for instance, exploited, but a lot of them were working. Even if they were working more than one job, to make up income if they were earning, they were low paid. And a lot of them were working in what is considered during the pandemic essential services. So you talk about people who are working in healthcare, you're talking about people working in social care and caring for people in their home, vulnerable people, elderly people in their homes, some of them working domestic workers who are undocumented people. Some were working, of course, in factories and hospitality and the rest of it. But a lot of them did not have a status, a pathway to obtaining status to stay in the country or pathway to citizenship. And that was one of the key demands of the campaign, was that you would get, the state can easily grant people status to stay in the country. And we were fortunate in that Ireland, actually, the Irish government does campaign for regularization of undocumented people in the US. And so every year they go abroad and ask the US government to regularize undocumented Irish people who live in the US. But they've never really introduced an regularization scheme, a wide or an inclusive regularization scheme here in Ireland. The only scheme we had was for particular students who came to Ireland who were studying in Ireland between 2015 and 2010 to 2015, I think. And those were people who were given an opportunity to regularize this. It's just anybody else who came for any other reason couldn't regularize their status. And so JFU leading the campaign, and we were there amplifying their demands, led to the government agreeing to regularizing undocumented people. They agreed to regularize people who have been undocumented if you're a single person or a grown up, without a minor child, if you have been resident in the country, undocumented in the country for at least 4 years. That's what they deem to be long-term undocumented. And if you have a minor child, you would have to be undocumented for a period of 3 years. For asylum seekers, the situation was different because there was a separate recommendation from a government-established advisory group that said 2 years. And so they said anybody who has been in the asylum system awaiting a final decision on their asylum claim for 2 years by the 7th of February, when the scheme was launched, can apply for permission to stay. They will be given leave to remain that gives them unrestricted access to the labor market, and it will give them supports, housing supports and social supports to leave the system of direct provision if they are in the direct provision system, so they can go and live in the community independently. But they will also have a pathway to Irish citizenship in the same manner that undocumented people who meet the criteria for regularization will also have a pathway to Irish citizenship. That campaign took an awful lot, both campaigns both for asylum seekers to end the system of direct provision, but regularization of undocumented took an awful lot of personal sacrifice on the part of people who were directly impacted, because through Mercy, we asylum seekers had to take the lead on ensuring that the voices, our voices are heard. And so we literally went out and told our stories and our experiences of how we struggle with life and what how the asylum system impacts on our lives from the minute you arrive and how long you are kept there waiting for a decision, being stripped of the right to work. Similarly, for undocumented people, it took bravery and courage. There was a group, for instance, formed by in the Migrant Rights Center in Ireland, where young people who grew up, born and raised in Ireland, grew up undocumented, and became of age and had to watch their Irish peers go to third level education or university education, and they couldn't access the same because they were undocumented. These are people who were denied virtually all access to public services. And so they led that campaign, and they took an enormous risk because the state could have simply just rounded them up and deported them. But they were brave enough to speak out, and to speak out in large volumes, because there was quite a lot of people, undocumented people, such as Irene, for instance, at JFU and Chanasi, who've been leading the campaign for about 11 years for regularization of undocumented people, culminating in in the scheme that we saw. Of course, we are aware that those schemes do exclude a number of people. So people, for instance, who were undocumented, subsequently recently claimed asylum, wouldn't qualify for any of these schemes. We've had, for instance, a person who was living in Ireland for 14 years as undocumented.
Bulelani, sorry to interrupt you. We are running late. Do you mind wrapping up? Because we're running late. Is that okay? I'm so sorry to interrupt you. So if you you have half a minute to wrap up. Thank you. Apologies. What you're saying is really great, interesting. We'd love to know more about, but we're running out of time for this session. Thank you.
Yeah, I can do that. Thank you. So quite a lot of those personal experience stories contributed to changing the hearts and minds. We had a very hostile reception in terms of governments in Ireland. Successive governments have always refused to, one, talk about regularization, but also to refuse to give asylum seekers access to the labor market through the right to work. Those the formal rights, such as the right to work or the right to have access to a driving license, were won through the courts, not on the streets. We did protest, but certainly a lot of change stemmed from a substantive change stemmed from the courts in terms of those. And so I'll pause there, and then we might engage later.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I mean, Faith, are you there? I'm not sure Faith might have some problem with the internet connection. If you're there, Faith, you can take over. If not, I'd like to invite Lucky, but also Lucky, can you please keep it brief, because we are running out of time, and we'd like to have a short break shortly after. So is Lucky there?
Hi, I don't know if you can hear me.
Yes, we can. Yes, go for it. We can. Okay.
All right. Sorry, I'm not gonna put the video on because I'm in the streets.
Fine.
So thank you for the opportunity, and thank you for Bulelani, who has summarized most of the relevant points that I would have also alluded to. Just to add as well is that with the right to work, when direct provision was established in 2000, and one of the key elements in direct provision was to put the ban to right to work for people that seek protection. And it went on for years, and nobody was challenging that in other areas until we then decided as Marci that we need to challenge this to the state. Fortunately, there was a case that went to court, and the government lost it, and that's where we are at the moment. So our campaign was very, very strong. We went to the briefings by the government. We did not, when we did not agree, we made them know. And we are still not happy with some of the definitions of the restrictions that still exist. So we are not done yet, because we want zero waiting period. At the moment is 6 months, and through the work of the likes of Catherine Day, there are a lot of things that that have come to pass as far as the asylum seekers is concerned. And we just have to keep on going. And the rest of the stuff, Bulelani has already fed you with there. So I'll leave it there. And thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Apologies, everyone, because we're running late. We will have a very short break, 5 minutes break, so to top up your tea or coffee or comfy break. Before we take the break, I'd like to thank all the speakers so far who spoke for at this session. Moses, Daisy, Mary Atkinson, Anna, Father Herbert, Lorraine, Sophie Cartwright, Bishop John, John MacDonald MP, Hector, Wesley, and Bulelani and Lucky from Marcian. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today and enriching our summit. So if we can now take a 5 minutes only break, please, and come back for our final session of the day. So we'll see you in 5 minutes. Thank you. I'm not sure we have any music, but I'm sure we'll announce in 5 minutes that we're back. Thank you. Thank you so much. Is everyone back? Yeah. Thank you. Brilliant to know that most people are still with us after the break. Welcome back to our final session of the day. The final session is into two parts, divided in 2 parts. The first part, we will start with we will listen to an interview done by Lorraine with Tony Conway. He's a member of the Public and Commercial Services Union. He's also on our reference group and also on the Coventry Against Racism. After that interview, we will move to listen to Leah Bassel from the Tribunal team about the People's Tribunal and the way forward as our major activity for the network in the coming month. So Lorraine, and over to you. And just to add, you have 5 minutes. Thank you.
Can I just say that Lorraine and Tony's is a video that here we go.
Thank you.
So Tony, I wanted to find out from you. You joined the Status Now for All campaign as someone from Coventry Against Racism.
That's right,
yeah, but currently you are volunteering as a TU trade union organizer. Why is that?
Well, I've been an activist in a trade union now for some 47 years, and I think there's a misunderstanding by trade unionists that when people get elected as a local representative or shop steward, that they suddenly become experts in racist practices, particularly those carried out by governments. And I'll be honest, I didn't really understand the impact of legislation on people in this country who didn't have the right to be here according to the government until I represented a member who worked in one of my employing departments, probably now about 7 years ago. And I was gobsmacked by the level of inadequate legal advice that she received and the fact that somebody had worked in this country and because of marital breakup was threatened to deportation back to Zimbabwe because she no longer had the right to be in this country according to government because she'd separated from her husband, who was the person who had the right to be here according to legislation. And I thought that was unfair. I thought that was wrong. She worked for a government department for about 8 years, and yet they're about to deport her. Luckily, after about 9 months, she was given leave to remain, but that really set me on a track of reading the regulations. And then when I retired some 4 years ago now, shortly afterwards, of course, we had the pandemic, and I was extremely concerned that people who didn't have indefinite leave to remain had no access to health. And I thought that was wrong, and I thought dangerous. And therefore, when you approached me, Lorraine, about the StatusNow network, I thought, well, this is something I think I can give something to. And because of my experience of working in unions and still being a union activist and being on things like trade union councils, I just slotted in to do something because nobody else was doing it. And that's simple reason why.
Yeah, thank you very much. StatusNow is actually so important a campaign because we have seen, you and I were on the ground, we have seen how it's affecting people, and especially so during the pandemic, it has been worse. But a lot of us, as you know, as asylum seekers, people who are undocumented and migrants, we are not aware of the trade unions because we are not allowed to work. Do you have a message to us? And
Well,
also maybe add also a message to the trade union representatives as well. Thank you.
Well, my main message actually is to the trade unions. People who have no right to work are exploited. Some of those people will work, but they'll work with their passports if they've got them, or some other means if they haven't, in a super exploited way. And unless trade unions represent those workers and potential workers, then they cannot claim to be the voice of workers in the UK. Secondly, of course, people who have not got leave to remain may well be eventually given leave to remain. And if you've not been represented by the major workers' organisation in this country, why would you then join a trade union? Because you'd say, you never bothered with me before, so why are you bothering with me now? So I think there's a win-win for both. But moreover, I would say that trade unions represent some 6 million people at work in this country. And with their extended families, we're talking 12 to 18 million people. They are a significant voice. And if we can get them on the side of our demand that indefinite leave should be given to people, then that will put pressure on governments, and it will put pressure on employers, and it will put pressure on, for example, the Labour Party to actually support that call. So I think it's important we get the biggest voluntary sector organisation in the UK on side.
Yeah. So do you think that trade unions are doing something to that extent already, or
I think trade unions, in my experience, based on my own knowledge, learn things as they go along. And because they're representing people in work, and I think, as you said, Lorraine, many people aren't allowed to work, they're less likely to pick up the case. Now, they are opposed to the Nationality and Borders Bill. They are opposed to the hostile environment. And it can't be too big a shift then to say, well, actually, to make that real, you also have to support indefinite leave to remain for people who come into the UK. We put a submission in, a StatusNow network, into the TUC, and we met the TUC to talk it through. And they were very supportive of the demand we were making. Obviously, the TUC works very slowly, as does unions, but most recently, my own trade union, PCS, which is the largest civil service union, agreed to support the StatusNow network, and indeed are jointly progressing with Care for Calais, a case against government, a legal case against government about the so-called pushback policy. So unions can be won for this position once it's linked to the campaign against racial discrimination in the UK.
I think StatusNow4All is a call for common sense. So I agree with you. Do you have anything else that you want to share today?
Yeah, I mean, I think that my call really is to both the Trade Union Congress, which represents all the trade unions, and also all the trade unions individually, to reach out to migrant organisation, bring them into their structures. Don't make them pay affiliation fees, but actually talk to them about their experiences, and actually publish the details of those experiences in their union journals. We have a big educational role for those workers here to explain why that's important. Some unions are doing some really fantastic stuff, but other unions perhaps can do a little bit more. So I would put that message out to trade unions. And I would say to people who are in a precarious situation, don't give up on trade unions. They do represent people who are low paid, who are exploited and super exploited. That's their modus operandi, if you like, Lorraine. And therefore they will automatically feel an empathy with what you're saying. And I think that's important to recognize as well.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much for your expertise and for your insight. I really appreciate. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Lorraine, and solidarity with you all.
Thank you so much, Lorraine and Tony. Thank you. Now to our final guest, Leah Bassel from the Tribunal team. She can introduce herself shortly, who will be talking to us, taking us through the People's Tribunal. As I said earlier, this will be our biggest project as a campaign. Yeah, without further ado, Leah is over straight to you. And please, you are, yes, try to stick to it given time. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. It's really a pleasure to be here. I'm honored to be part of this event, and I've learned a lot already from everything that people have shared. So thank you so much. I have huge respect for the work that you're doing. Najak, it would be very helpful for me if you could just tell me when it's getting close to the time to stop, because I'm very keen to respect everybody's time. If I could just share my screen, that would be super. So just while we're sorting that out, just by way of explaining to you, because I have some PowerPoint slides I would like to use if that's possible. So I came to this project as someone who was invited to participate in the 2018 London Permanent People's Tribunal that took place to put the hostile environment on trial. Sorry, it looks like I still can't share my slides, so I'll just speak if that's easier. So this was an opportunity to be part of this moment where the hostile environment was put on trial through what is referred to as a People's Tribunal. And for me, this was a really interesting kind of possibility, because I'm someone who has been involved in issues around migration. I'm an academic. I'm a professor at the University of Roehampton in sociology. I do research on migration. And so being a juror in this event linked up to some interests I had around how we can build solidarity by listening to each other in new and different ways. And this was a project that I participated as a juror, and then this became a research project where I was able to step back from the experience of being a juror at the tribunal and to think about, well, what happened here? What was so powerful and effective about this People's Tribunal? And how can we compare this to other such People's Tribunals, whether they focus on migrants' rights or other issues, to make this a very powerful tool to overcome fear and division and to build solidarity in new ways. So I'm going to make a couple points about that in our few minutes together. And if you click on that link of my name on the program, you'll have access to the briefing paper that, with the colleagues who were part of the organizing Permanent People's Tribunal group in London, we put together to give some of the elements, the background, but also the practicalities and the possibilities of organizing a People's Tribunal. I'm just going to try the share again. Nope, it looks like not going to work.
Michael, could you make Leah a co-host if Michael is still here? Sorry, only the main host.
No worries. I'll just keep talking. It's not a problem at all. Thanks. So, but as I was saying before, these are approaches that have quite a long history, going back to the 1960s and 70s and even earlier, in terms of public, democratic, community-driven processes to explore and to bring to light human rights violations. So we're just here now.
Yep.
Yep, perfect. Thank you so much. Thanks. So you can see here some of the characteristics of these opportunities, and the image you see on your left is the London Tribunal I was speaking to you about that took place in 2018. So we're talking up here about democratic and community-driven processes, and it's important to emphasize that, because I think logically, when you hear tribunal, you think of the law. And what's very interesting about people's tribunals is the way they are democratic and community-driven processes that use the law, but in a quasi-legal way. Like they're not actually legally binding, but they're using the tribunal and the idea and the spirit of the law to bring violations to light and to demand justice. And I think really consistently with what people have been talking about in terms of your work, it's very important within people's tribunals that communities are actors for their rights. So you've spoken about centering people with lived experience of the issues you're exploring in this movement. And this is really important in terms of what a permanent people's or what a people's tribunal involves. And it's really also central that this is not a kind of one-off and end game, the tribunal itself, the people's tribunal. It's a process or a moment in a process toward other goals. So in the case of this London 2018 tribunal, it was one type of tribunal called a permanent people's tribunal, and there are different possibilities, different methods, and different creative approaches that can be adopted. It involved a really wide range of groups that I think overlap with many of the groups and issues you've just been speaking about: Institute of Race Relations, Global Justice Now, Walling, Unite the Union, so many different groups, that's just to name some of the conveners. And the focus here was to put the hostile environment on trial with a specific focus on working conditions and the right to work. And I think really crucially, and is the ambition for unity, for overcoming the false divisions of migration control and austerity that pit groups against each other, and the kinds of siloization and fragmentation across migrant serving or migrant supporting and migrant-led organizations, where sometimes there are these kinds of divisions that really get in the way of building the kind of solidarity that is needed. So these are some of the ambitions and the possibilities of this specific People's Tribunal, but People's Tribunals more generally. And because I don't have very much time, I'm sorry, I'm just going to carry on through. And you can see on this slide some, though not all, of the details of what a People's Tribunal involves. These are really very practical points, and there are more details about them in the briefing paper that you can click through to, whether that's in terms of who you appoint as a jury, not necessarily people who are perceived as objective or neutral, but people who are respected for having sound judgment and solid positions. The steps of producing an indictment. So here, putting the hostile environment on trial in the broader context of violations with impunity of the human rights of migrants and refugee peoples. Steps afterwards, including a call for evidence, which can really be very time consuming on the part of organizing group, on the part of jury, but very, very important to then invite witnesses, to hold the public hearing, which in this case was from the 3rd to 4th of November 2018, as you can see from the image on the slide. And then really importantly, to translate that into a ruling and a deliberation that brings together the evidence, the experiences, the passion, and the emotion also of the moment. And I think beyond these very specific organizational details are the issues that you're all, this is a context in which I'm speaking to people who are very knowledgeable and experienced organizers. And obviously the questions around how and who is leading such a tribunal, such a People's Tribunal, becomes very important in terms of how it plays out and how it's organized, how it's staged, how it's put together, how different networks are mobilized, and the kinds of relations of trust that are brought together. So that's that the People's Tribunal space is a safe space for different groups, that it's an accessible space, and really thinking clearly. And I think this has come up in some of the speeches we've already heard, which again were just so impressive and moving, but about what it is that's desired from the tribunal. There can be that agreement around the issues and the problem, but not necessarily the agreement around what the alternatives are. So what is wanted and what are the risks? And how really to reach beyond the usual suspects. So for instance, beyond the signatory groups. And these are all issues that are part of the organization, part of the planning, but also part of the execution, how the day is run and what happens afterwards is run. The strategic choices, for instance, in who is involved in a jury to be able to spread the message and the results afterwards, to share the good word about what has been learned and what can be done. So just on my last, on the last point, really, I'd said this already at the beginning because it's really the most important point. What can it achieve? And I had spoken about the ways in which it can be possible to overcome fear and division. And this was very strongly expressed in the London 2018 People's Tribunal, because you can ask the question always about such a People's Tribunal, why use this legal format if it's not legally binding? What does that achieve? And you can see some of the ways in which, looking at the bullet points that you have, that you can see on this slide, the types of ways in which this can be a very, very powerful way of sharing experiences, of bringing visibility to the kinds of violations that everyone has been talking about today, to do that in a way in which that is empowering, where people share their experiences side by side in this tribunal format, and this is recognized as truth, and this is recognized as powerful forms of knowledge, and this is spoken and said. I remember this in the London 2018 tribunal, when much of the testimony from people with lived experience of hostile environment, not just in the UK, but across Europe, talked about how, well, this is not new, it's just become more hostile. And the power of saying that and then acting and strategizing around that, placing those experiences side by side, was very, very robust and convincing. On the point about visibility, you can see this image here of how the hostile environment creates sites without rights. This was really important because it was a booklet that was produced a few years after the tribunal took place. And I just bring this to your attention in terms of thinking through the mechanics of the event itself, but what can happen afterwards. This is a really powerful and interesting document that's not so much of a record, but more of what could be referred to as a mobilizing document, a document that can be used for all the things that need to happen next after the tribunal itself. And in terms of building solidarity, for me, one of the most powerful and important aspects of such a People's Tribunal around migrant rights, but also with regard to other issues, is the way it makes it possible to identify points of difference and to work through them. So to find those mechanisms of injustice and oppression, the different impacts of rights violation, because they're not identical for all people and for all groups of people, and to think about how that then points to different forms of collaboration, to find common solutions and to find those pressure points, the different groups that need to be forced, that leaned on and pushed in different directions and the way they're acting. The power of the tribunal, People's Tribunal, comes, I would suggest, from below. I've mentioned already that this is not a legally enforceable verdict, for instance. We found as jurors of the 2018 London Tribunal a verdict of violence by design, of systemic racism through hostile environment policies across Europe and in the UK. And what becomes important then is not the ways in which it's possible to enforce that verdict on the indicted parties, on the UK government, on EU member states, on the EU. What becomes important is the way we, the different groups and different individuals and different actors who are part of the tribunal, can act on that verdict and can act together on that verdict to create new programs for action, new campaigning and new policies. And just to come to my last point, and then I will stop so I don't take too much of your time, is really the power of speaking across groups. And I think some of the most powerful moments, certainly of the 2018 London Tribunal, were when non-migrant groups were participating and speaking to and with advocates and migrant justice leaders, whether that was trade unions, as we were just discussing in our session, or anti-austerity campaigners, educators and education activists, disabled people's movements. All of these voices were raised with and alongside and also overlapping with migrant testimony. And that required that trust in those networks, so people felt comfortable and able to share those experiences in that environment, but also those moments created empathy and solidarity. And that makes different possibilities to intervene into mainstream political debate, for instance, reaching out beyond the usual suspects, the people maybe one is used to organizing with. And to show also that the injustices that are shown up by the tribunal are not, for instance, just about migrants, that intersects with other lives. This is about how migration and racial justice and economic justice and gender justice matters for all of us. So these are the possibilities, and I hope I've given you a sense of this in this moment that we've had together. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen now, and I'd be happy if people would like to discuss this further later on to be in touch by email, and you have the link to the briefing paper that provides greater detail. Thanks so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you so much, Leah, and thank you for sticking to the time. Brilliant, thank you. I mean, I know we're running very late. We could take a question or two. I don't know, I'm waiting for my colleagues to send me. If anyone has a question for Leah, please send it right now. If not, maybe I'll ask you one question while waiting for a question to arrive. So if people are concerned, Leah, and worried about taking part, you know, what would be your advice for them? I mean, you know, many of our members are undocumented, and they might be worried about their, you know, a case, about their identity being revealed. This might affect whatever, you know, their application, etc. How would you assure them, or, you know, what message you have for them?
And I think this is why it's so important to be in the work of the group who organizes the People's Tribunal, that different perspectives and experiences are reflected from the start. So the way people are brought together, the way the tribunal is organized, the way participants are invited is right from the start, organized by people with this direct experience of for instance, being undocumented, and complete awareness of what one is being asked to do by showing up and acting and speaking in a particular space. Certainly in the tribunals I participated in, there was the London Tribunal and also the Berlin Tribunal, which took place during the pandemic. There was definitely participation from people who were undocumented, who had different range of legal statuses. And that was a real responsibility on the part of the organizers to make sure that the safeguards were in place, to make sure also that it would be possible for people to participate without those kinds of repercussions that you've just spoken about, Najik, or without the fear of those repercussions. And that was very successfully done when the organizing group properly represented different statuses and different experiences. Otherwise, organization happens in the image and experience of a small group of people and not of everybody, and that's really essential.
Excellent, thank you so much. Thank you. Don, I could see you raise your hand. You have a question for Leah?
Not so much a question, actually, Nazik. I just wanted to supplement it. It's as a person within the Status Now who's been given the job of trying to drive the organisation of a People's Tribunal. I wanted to really get across the fact that there is a group within the network who's interested in doing this, and we urgently need people to come up from our ranks, people who are watching this summit now, in fact, to actually come forward. You know, at the moment, we'd welcome just inquiries about how you might be involved. I mean, typically the way to proceed is to form a steering group, very, very conventional of us, but to get together half a dozen or so representatives of half a dozen organisations in order to work through the list of the things that Leah has presented to us, the fact that we need to draft an indictment. What would a statement actually look like, which brings together the core of our complaint about the policies of British government and how it has been working to systematically make people more vulnerable and in the way that they have done. And then, having done that, how do we get evidence on that? It means going out right the way across the country to the scores, probably hundreds, and possibly even thousands of migrant and refugee rights organisations who will have views on these issues within the casework that they're actually dealing with. They'll have examples that they'll want to present to us. It's a series of very practical tasks, but as ever, we need bodies in order to do it. We need people who have been, their imagination has been fired by the possibility of organising a People's Tribunal, and they're ready to work with us over the course of the next few months. We're talking about trying to do this with a public hearing taking place in November. So effectively, we've got the spring and the summer months in order to do this. And if you are in any way intrigued by this idea, then please do get in touch with us, because we'd love to hear from you and see what we can do to work on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Excellent. Thank you so much. Thank you. I guess since there are no questions, before I conclude, I'd like to invite, thank you so much, Leah, and thank you so much, Tony, for speaking at this, at our final session. I'd like to invite Anna Marsden for 30 seconds to say hello, introduce herself. You have 30 seconds, Anna, before I can conclude, so we make sure we all finish on time at least, and enjoy the rest of the day. So Anna, over to you to introduce yourself briefly. Welcome.
Okay, thank you. Difficult to introduce in 30 seconds. I'll try my best.
You have 1 minute. Fine.
Okay, thank you. It's a good start. I already followed the activity of the Status Now network and signed the petition a long time ago, but I just joined a few days ago as a network development coordinator, and I would say that starting with a meeting like that of today, it's quite exciting and stimulating. I am a British Italian citizen, moved to the UK in 2010, lived in between Italy and UK for some years, and since 2016 I settled in London. I've worked in the migration field for more than 30 years with migrants and refugees from different ethnic backgrounds. I created and ran a center in Italy that worked for many years. I've worked as a journalist in the first magazine published in Italy on migration stuff, and the editorial board was mostly made up of migrants and refugees, with just a few Italians, including myself. In the UK, I volunteered with several charities, including Migrant Voice, and participated to important campaigns as the Toy campaign, which we launched in 2018, and presently in the campaign against the visa fees. As I said, I joined just a few days ago, so I'm still in the process to know all of you. For the moment, I only met a few of you, and so it's the first time I see most of you, but I plan to meet everyone in the next days, weeks, and to start working together. I will put my email in the chat so that everyone is able to contact me. And I found the discussion today really useful, but of course, we'll need to discuss much more about all of this, especially in organizing terms. And I hope we'll work well together. I plan to meet every group to organize the job. My role will be to help the organization, to help communication inside and outside the network about our activity. I think the People Tribunal can be a great stage to improve our impact on public opinion and develop better our campaign for the Status Now for All. It will be a way to contrast the negative view of migrants and refugees and clarify with clear evidence and large impact how the under regulation, the so-called illegal and so on, it's not a choice of migrants and refugees, but it's a clear part of the hostile environment. It's a product of this government, and show evidence will be a great result of the tribunal. It's quite difficult to fit everything.
Anna,
just tried.
More than 30 seconds, but thank you so much and welcome on board the Status Now team. We're looking forward to working with you. So welcome again, and thank you. So now everyone knows who you are, and hopefully they will get in touch and you will be contacting many people soon. So thank you so much. I think we have 5 minutes where it's my time to try to wrap up and to conclude the event. Of course, I want to thank everyone who came today and gave up their Saturday afternoon to join us, to be with us. And thank you for everyone who shared their experience, their expertise, their views, their opinions, their ideas. I think this is what we need in order to move forward. And I've made a few notes to conclude the event. And of course, I've noted some of the, well, inspiring quotes I've heard from people. So I wanted us to end the day. I'd like to us all to feel inspired by some of them. But maybe I want to start this by saying it's easy to feel deflated and exhausted in this current environment. So in a hostile environment, created as a government policy. And this environment continues to flourish in a new nationality and borders bill, which, as John MacDonald mentioned earlier, it will criminalize people fleeing safety and persecution, fleeing wars, fleeing for their safety, fleeing wars and persecutions. It will criminalize them, treat them like criminals. It will go against all, international conventions for human rights. I mean, it will go, it will change the way we know protection. It will change it forever. It will also criminalize those great people who actually have a heart and want to support people who are fleeing persecution for their safety. So I think we are still in that environment. But you know what? Giving up hope is not a choice for us. It is not a choice. It's not a choice. As we've seen from the recent sad events in Ukraine, and we stand in solidarity with Ukrainians, the public mood has changed. So the government should follow suit. And, earlier on, someone was talking about the message that, treating people, giving people status or treating people with dignity would send the wrong message. Now, this message is the wrong message. And I think, as I said, giving up is not, or giving up hope is not a choice. And that's why we are here all today to renew our commitment to fighting for the rights of everyone in the UK, to be treated with dignity and respect. Now, as I said, I've selected some of the quotes that inspired me, and I would like to share with you to end the event, so we'll leave you feeling inspired and energized. Someone said, and people who know themselves, I'm not going to name them, where there is unity, there is power. But this was shortly followed by another speaker, who said, we snowball our power. So it's, there's really important, unity is important, and this is was clearly shown today. Someone said we are all human and we should have equal rights. Absolutely, absolutely. Someone also said, and it's just as part of what they said, sorry, apologies for that. I was a stranger and you welcomed me. I mean, this is beautiful, but you know what? Undocumented migrants or people in legal processes, they're not really strangers. They're our neighbors. They're our, cleaners, our nurses, our workers, our, fellow human beings. So we need to treat people differently, and it's time to give them status. Again, someone said we need the gift of networking. Another person said we need to work together for the common good. And I think this is what we're doing today. This is us. We have this gift today. We've been given this gift, and we're all networking and talking to each other and coming together, because we need to work together for the common good. And as one also colleague said, Status Now for All is not a call for help. It is an appeal for common sense. So I hope you will join us, join the campaign to support us, to make sure that everyone in this country is treated with dignity and respect. Everyone can access healthcare, can access housing, can fulfill their full potential. And we put an end to this great discrimination and hostility against fellow human beings. And there are many of them. We're not talking about a small number. We're talking about over 1 million people in the UK for a number of years who are, going through unimaginable suffering and struggle because of a hostile environment created as a policy. I mean, it's overdue, not about time, actually, we're a bit late. We need to dismantle that policy, and we need to, again, remind the government that the public mood has changed. So the government should change its policies, and we need to have a voice, and we need to continue fighting. So if you're new to the network, please make sure you join us. Please make sure you work with us. And we look forward to working together. And I really hope we won't have another summit. I really hope next summit will be that we've achieved what we wanted, but only by coming together, by our, again, another person said, we will never compromise on our ethics and values. By coming together and doing this, hopefully we can achieve. We have to continue campaigning and fighting for the rights of everyone, because it's not just for the pandemic and the virus and everyone is safe until everyone is vaccinated, but it's also, we all need to be treated equally. We all need to be treated as human beings, and every person's right is important, relevant to all of us. So I want to again thank you so much, and please do join us. And as apologies, I think we're 1 minute over time. I hope you can enjoy the rest of the afternoon. You have our details, you have the website. Do contact us, do join us, and we will be in touch again soon. Thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of the day.